14. Elements of Research Design. Contents. 14.1 Introduction. 14.2 Structuring the Research Process. 14.3 Conclusion. Learning Objectives. It is expected that after reading Unit 14, you would be able to prepare a research designs of your own mini research project, which would include the following details: the research problem that you have decided to work on, the choice of the field site where you would carry out your research, the estimated time and cost of the research, review of already published material related to your research topic, the hypothesis or hypothesis you have set out to test, theoretical orientation of your research, the universe and unit of study of the research and methods of data collection, interpreting the data and writing the research findings. 14.1 Introduction. Research design is a kind of blueprint that you prepare before actually carrying out research. It is a systematically prepared outline stating the manner in which you plan to carry out your research. You may like to contemplate your research in terms of two facets, namely the empirical facet and analytical facet. The two facets remains in your mind together, while in practical terms you may plan your research in terms of a phase of data collection and another phase of analyzing the data. Theoretical orientation and conceptual models in your mind help you decide the kind of data you would collect and to some extent also how you would collect them. Later, while analyzing your data, again your theoretical and conceptual understanding of social reality in general will guide you to classify the data and to recognize the pattern in order to explain and present your findings. Research is an ongoing process consisting of a series of steps beginning with your identifying various concepts related to your research theme. Once begun, it continues through a set of regulated steps to its conclusion. Unit 14 is about steps that you state in your research design. We are going to discuss each of the 10 broad steps that generally constitute the basic elements of sociological researches. For your assignment of carrying out a mini research project, you may prepare a research design. Structuring the research process. The structuring of the research process is an essential part of science. However, this does not mean that these steps are always in a sequence. In fact, the various phases of research overlap. At times, the first step determines the nature of the last step. The steps involved are not mutually exclusive, nor they are separate and distinct. Figure 14.1 depicts the broad steps researchers usually take in the process. First, defining the research problem, then reviewing the literature, then identifying the universe and unit of study, and formulating a hypothesis and identifying the variables, and selection of research techniques and methods, and standardization of research, then pilot study of the statistical and other methods, collecting data, analyzing data, interpretations and report writing. This is figure 14.1, 10 steps in research design. Just we read. The research design is the strategic plan of the project that sets out the broad structure of the research. See box 14.1 for a brief mention of functions and purposes of preparing a research design. Box 14.1 the functions and purpose of research design. Black and Champion have pointed out the following three functions of research design. A research design provides a blueprint of operationalizing the research activities. It defines the limit and scope of the research. It provides an opportunity to the researcher to foresee possible areas of problems in the process carrying out the research. Menheim identified the following 5 purposes of preparing the research design: to gather sufficient evidence to support one's hypothesis and to disprove alternative hypotheses, to carry out a research that can be repeated in terms of its subject matter and research procedure,
In other words, it does not pertain only to unique situations that has no relevance to society at large. To be able to work out correlations among variables in a manner that produces interrelated propositions. To make out the need for a pilot study in order to carry out the future plans of a full-fledged research project. To be able to economize one on time and resources by selecting appropriate techniques of data collection. A highly standardized quantitative research strictly follows the research design, while qualitative research is flexible and amendments to the design are possible. Nevertheless, it is always a good idea to formulate a research design. A research design needs to take into account the following consideration, which entail all the steps mentioned in figure 14.1. Defining your research problem. In the research process, the first step is to select and clearly define the problem to be researched. You need to find the problem and formulate it so that it can be subjected to research. A research problem in general refers to some inquiry which a researcher undertakes in the context of either a theoretical or practical situations and wants to obtain an explanation of the same. The formulation of a general topic into a specific research problems constitutes the first step in a scientific inquiry. Essentially, two steps are involved in formulating the research problems, that is, understanding the problems thoroughly and rephrasing it into meaningful terms from the analytical point of view. You need to select the subject that is familiar and feasible so that research materials or sources of research are within your research. It is better to select the research problem before a preliminary study of the existing literature. Formulating or defining a research problem is an important step in the research process, and a clearly stated problem is research half done. You need to clearly state the research questions in the light of the topic of research and the theoretical foundations on which it rests. Next, you need to spell out the aims and objectives as per the requirements of your research questions. These give the research process a well-defined focus and definition. Unless one has a clear idea of objectives, the course of research will not be smooth and the data will not have the desired consistency, because it's possible for you to approach a topic from the viewpoint of different perspectives, each addressing a different sets of issues. For instance, research on the sociology of development can have many research questions like women's roles in development, the role of caste and kinship in development, and the social consequences of development on family and community life of people. While preparing a research design, demarcate the focus of research by jotting down the outline and features of topics and the aims and objectives of research. Choice of field site. Embarking on a research give as much emphasis to the area of research as the topic. To some extent, the choice of the area determines the success of your research. The relevance of a research topic depends on its usefulness to the problems of the area, either in terms of practical purposes or obtaining a theoretical understanding of the epistemological issues. For instance, a study on communal relations cannot be carried out in a tribal village. In such a study, you would need to observe the interactions between different religious groups, and therefore you would choose an area inhabited by people of several religious communities. It is desirable to have 2 or 3 sub-areas in mind within the broad area. For instance, sometimes you may encounter some unforeseen and unimaginable, unmanageable problems at the district level or the village level, and then you would need to find an alternative to fall back upon. You should first spell out your choice of field site and then start gathering information on it. This would help you gain an understanding of the geographical and geopolitical conditions of the area, which would have a bearing on the collection of data. This would help you frame your research strategies and questions in a manner suited to the areas and its people. Consideration of time and resources. You need to be fully aware of the limits of your resources and also clearly define the time frame while designing your research. Unless you draw a schedule of the different steps of your research, it is likely to become a long drawn process, which is bad for both quality and relevance. Imagine Researches on cholera epidemics takes years to complete. The delay would mean poor quality of research and an unchecked death rate. We also know that unless you get liberal time, your research would fail because you cannot subject social reality to overnight machine tests in the laboratory to obtain quick results. You need to evaluate the time required in a realistic manner and plan the strategy accordingly. Careful planning and sticking to the time schedule will help you use your resources effectively and complete the research in time. Besides, you should be aware of the limits of your resources and plan the strategy in a realistic and cost-effective manner. If the resources are exhausted midway, it will be a severe blow to research. If an agency is funding the research, your credibility is at stake. Credibility is in stake. Hence, you need to clearly state in your research design the time and the resources that you have for research. You need also to foresee and note down the effects of your resource constraints on the research process. After identifying the effects of, you would develop strategies to encounter those you can possibly do. The account of those which cannot be managed will help future researchers to be familiar with them and deal with them in their prospects. Reviewing secondary material. The purpose of reviewing the existing literature on your research theme is to help you assess the feasibility of the project but also formulate an effective methodology. You would need to consult academic journals, conferencing proceedings, government reports, books, etc. 10 point, box 14.2, the use of computer in literature searching. For the purpose of making use of the internet facility to search related literature, you need to read Unit 32 in Block 8 of Block 3. If your research topic is precisely defined, the search can be very fast and efficient way of obtaining relevant references in a number of bibliographic tools. You may review two types of literature concerning the concepts and theories and the empirical literature consisting of studies made earlier. You may come across even such studies that contain both theoretical as well as substantive aspects of your research. The outcome of the review will be that you will know about available data and other materials on the theme of your research. A more sophisticated and clear statement of specific research question is likely to emerge after the literature review. When researchers prepare a research design, they draw an outline of an entire research process. They need to have a clear picture of the nature of data that would help tackle the research questions. For instance, researchers decide in advance how many case studies would help them draw meaningful conclusions or the number of life histories that they need to collect and of which categories of persons. A lot of hard work and insightful thinking goes into the process. Researchers review the past studies of their topics and work upon their research questions to arrive at a realistic research design. Scheduling the time and events to observe in the field norms an important component of your research design. This provides you a sense of direction while collecting data. This does not imply that you have to strictly follow your schedule regardless of the situation in the field. The actual field conditions do guide you, and correspondingly your research designs may face anticipated changes. Yes, you cannot just land up in the field unprepared and bewildered, and hence you need to plan out the various stages and strategies of research. At the same time, you have to be ready to make adjustments according to the field exigencies. Hypothesis. After extensive literature survey, you need to state in clear terms the working hypothesis or hypothesis. The hypothesis is a tentative assumptions made in order to test its logical or empirical consequences. You may define as a hypothesis as a propositions or a set of propositions set forth as an explanation for the occurrence of some specified phenomena, either accepted merely as a provisional conjecture to gauge some investigations or accepted as highly probable in the light of established facts. A hypothesis may seem contrary to the real situation. It may prove to be correct or incorrect. In any event, it leads to an empirical test. Your hypothesis needs to be clear and precise and capable of being tested. It is to be limited in scope and consistent with known or established facts and should be amenable to testing within the stipulated time. It needs to explain what is clear claims to explain and should have empirical reference. A hypothesis may have variables and it may be looking for the natural nature of the relationship between the variables. The variables are empirical properties that takes two or more values. For the purpose of research, you need to make a distinction between dependent and independent variables. The variables that you wish to explain are regarded as dependent variables or criterion variables. The other variables to explain the change in the independent variable is referred to as the independent variable or predictable variable. The dependent variable is the expected outcome of the independent variable, and the independent variable produce independent variables. Independent variables produce dependent variables. Variables can have three types of relationship among them. A positive relationship is one where as an increase in one variable leads to an increase in the other. A negative relationship is one where an increase in one variable leads to a decrease in the other. Finally, a zero relationship, one which shows no distinct relationship between the two variables. Such a distinction between the dependent and independent variables is analytical and relates only to the research purpose. It needs to be mentioned that the formulation of hypothesis is not always a part of research process. You may carry out explanatory research when you do not have sufficient knowledge of the situation to prepare the hypothesis. Theoretical orientation. Your research designs need to be clearly spelled out and the data collection methods to be employed. Your methodological and philosophical orientations governs your choice of methods. Your research design should elucidate the methodological and theoretical basis of research and help you to identify appropriate methods and techniques of data collection. For instance, if you have a positivistic orientation, you would rely on observational method because for your social reality would be an observable entity. On the other hand, if you adopt a phenomenological method, you would employ the various kind of interviews to unravel the logic behind model of culture. A researcher conforming to the postmodernist approach would view society, reality as multidimensional and record multiple voices and interpretations. An action research with limited time resources would employ triangulation, comprising multiple methods and multiple investigations. And focus groups discussions, you have to carefully choose from the vast repertoire of sociological and anthropological methods, the one that suit your research purpose most. Universe and unit of study. Before starting with the data collections, you have to identify the universe and the unit of study. The identification of the universe implies the demarcation of the physical area and social unit of the study. The universal consists of the population within a well-known area where the study is to be conducted. However, such a group is usually too large and not possible to cover by a single investigator. Therefore, a similar and more manageable group may be selected by sampling. The outlines of the universe and its attributes may be delineated more clearly by taking a consensus and then making the choice of the groups to work on. Within the broad universe, further specification of possible units that could be studied makes up the actual or effective universe. The group selected as focus of study is called the unit of study. The pilot study. The pilot study is the leading study in your research area. The pilot study leads to the researchers to be full-length investigation depending on the size of the population and the amount of time. In other words, a pilot study is an exemplary study done before the actual work starts in the field. It is a pre-testing of your research methods and techniques in order to perfect them. Pilot study will ensure that the right questions have been put in the questionnaires for making the field work fruitful. It makes you aware of the difficulties beforehand and provides you as an opportunity to modify your techniques to suit field conditions. Pilot study depends upon the size of the population, the time available and the availability of funds. Sampling. A universe is often too large for an individual to work upon. A sample is a smaller representation of a larger whole. The sampling allows the researchers to work scientifically and save time. Analyzing large quantities of material is wasteful and an intensive analysis of fewer cases is economical. You need to be cautious and careful while sampling. As explained earlier, the universe refers to the defined population size, such a universe may be further divided depending on the specification required. This is now a structure of subpopulation. A stature is a divisible category which depends upon the kinds of problems in which one is interested. A sampling frame includes all the elements of a population from which the samples are drawn. The determination of an error while sampling, statistically or qualitatively, is known as sampling error. The sample must be true representative of universe as well as being adequate in size. For different kinds of sampling, see units in block 5 and 6 of block 2. Data collection. After obtaining some idea and understanding your field and working out your methods and techniques of data collection, you may plan how to access the field. Quite often, social research requires the study of other community, and researchers need to make extensive preparations to gain entry into the society under study. One needs to plan who would facilitate access and how one would contact such persons. It is also possible to study one's own society. Some scholars, for example, made 1971 made not adhere to the idea of studying the other community only. In box 14.3, we bring you an excerpt from the Union. We bring you an excerpt from Madan, who questions the requirement of the personal study of an alien culture on the part of every anthropologist. Box number 14.3, on studying one's own community. Instead, I emphasize the importance of bridging the gap, or conversely creating it, because the observer and the observed, between the observer and observer. I describe field work as the fiat of living immediately with strangers. I might have added, or strangely with intimates, which was what I had done during my fieldwork among the Pandits of rural Kashmir. The anthropologist studying his own culture, I wrote, is an insider who takes up the posture of an outsider by virtue of his training as an anthropologist or a sociologist, and looks at his own culture hoping to be surprised. If he is, only then maybe achieve new understandings. In addition to the questions of studying the other or your own community, you need to be clear in mind whether you wish to keep the purpose of research overt or covert. While in covert research, the research remains distinguished and the researcher does not bother about convincing the informants. The overt research implies the challenges of convincing the respondents and winning over their trust. You have to adopt a meaningful role in the society under study and be careful about the sensitivities of your informants. Although the access and role of the researcher are negotiated and renegotiated in the field according to the circumstances, thoughtful planning gives you an edge to start the research process with adequate preparation. This is important because, firstly, if you identify the right contact persons or the gatekeepers, the prominent person of the community who have power to grant or deny access to the field, beforehand you are entitled to the field would not be time consuming and cumbersome. Prior interactions with the gatekeepers would also help you adopt a suitable role in the field. Secondly, if you are already convinced whether you to keep your research purpose covert or overt, you can effectively negotiate your access to the field. There are several ways of collecting your data. Primary data are those which you as the researcher collect yourself. You consult secondary data for reference sources like the library, etc. Primary data can be collected either through experiment or through survey. There are two main techniques of data collection, namely intensive fieldwork methods and survey methods. Intensive field methods include observations, interview, case study, genealogy, etc. You can use one or more methods to collect the data, taking into consideration the nature of investigation, objectives and the scope of inquiry, financial resources and the time available, and degree of accuracy. The data to be collected would need to be adequate and dependable. Analysis and report writing. After data collection, you would turn to their analysis. Analysis requires a number of closely related operations such as establishing categories and their applications to raw data through coding, tabulation, and so that you can draw statistical inferences. For coding and tabulation of coded symbols, you need to be carefully read the units in blocks 5 and 6 of book 2 and blocks 7 and 8 of book 3. Tabulation is a part of the technical procedures wherein you are able to put your classified data in the form of tables. See box number 14.4, classifying and coding the data. Classification facilitates rapid, accurate and comprehensive search of stores field material, but a poor classification or careless retrieval may be worse than having none at all. In connection with this, particular attention should be paid to classification with separate data which are otherwise related. For example, if name giving ceremonies are indexed only under ritual, a search intended to assemble all data on kinship may fall short of the mark. Notes must in the first instances be coded so that they can be subsequently located in a mass of material. You will probably wish to refer back to earlier notes quite frequent in the field to check up on certain matters and test informal hypotheses. At the very least, all sheets should be numbered sequentially. You need to clearly delineate the forms of analysis you wish to eventually adopt. Although after the nature of data collected by you determines the nature of the analysis, yet the stages of opting for certain methods of data collection, you would have some idea of analytical tools you are like to employ. If you plan to adopt certain computer packages, you would need to collect data keeping them in mind. While analysis may depend upon the nature of data, you need to be careful to avoid the reserved situation. That is, the predetermined mode of analysis solely determines the method of data collection. You may face getting on a one-sided picture of the social reality if you were to adopt computer-based methods only because computer packages offers analysis of a particular dimensions of reality while social research requires as broad a picture of reality as possible. You would be better off collecting data covering as many dimensions of reality as possible. In any case, you need to be quite clear about the mode of analysis to employ to interpret the data collected. Your research design is meant to reflect your theoretical orientation. In this way, you are actually planning to every stage of research, from identifying the topic of research and method of data collection to report writing. Your research designs would be complete if you spell out the manner in which you would present the result of the research. It is an equally important step because you would need to keep in mind the ethics of presentation, especially if the research deals with the sensitive issues. While you seek to unravel social reality, you cannot play with the privacy of people who are more than just the object of research. It is your responsibility to do justice both to the research and to the people. There is a practicing of presenting data with pseudonyms and modification of identities, events and location. You need to be always elucidate in your research design in the manner in which you would report the result. Presentations of research finding of publications implies their distributions among the public, including those you studied. This is the point when you achieve the aim of making a contribution to general body of literature related to the subject of your research. 14.3 Conclusion. Unit 14 has enumerated the various steps for undertaking a sociological research with the aim of preparing you to carry out one such research. This will be a practical exercise for you to complete as a compulsory requirement of completing MSO 002. You will need to prepare a research design before actually carrying out your mini research project. The reflections and actions exercise for Unit 14 is that you prepare the research design for your proposed research. Maybe you may of course modify it as you come to learn in more detail about the various steps needed to be research process. Reflections and action 14.1. Prepare a research design of your proposed research after selecting tentatively a topic of your interest. The research design needs to incorporate all the steps shown in figure 14.1. Further reading. Singleton, Junior Royce A. Bruce C. Straits 1999 Approaches to Social Research, Oxford University Press, New York. Salantakos E.S. 1919, first published in 1993. Social Research, Macmillan London. This is the end of the chapter 40, unit 40. Thank you very much.